The police were banging on my front gate. And not just one or two. There were 4 squad cars lined up at the entrance of my ranch. Sirens spinning. Lights flashing. Like I had just robbed a bank. One officer yelled through a loudspeaker, "Step away from the gate. This is an official order." All I did was put up a metal cattle gate. I had been using the same gate for years. I had to reinforce it just last night, after a pickup truck rammed through it again. But this time it was different. This time, the Homeowners Association, the HOA I didn't even belong to, had sued me. They claimed I had blocked public access to a road they clandestinely constructed, a road that cuts through the heart of my exclusive ranch, a road that was not legally recognized. 3 months ago, that road sliced straight through my livestock pasture, frightening my animals and splitting my land in half, as if I didn't even own it. And now, they were using the police to force me to open my gate, claiming I was endangering public access. I stood my ground. I raised both hands and calmly shouted back, "This is private land. That road is illegal." An officer shouted again, "Sir, unlock the gate, or we will force entry." And that's when I said the words that changed everything. Not only am I not unlocking it, every member of that HOA is now banned from stepping foot on my land. The officers froze, but it was already too late. At that precise moment, my spouse emerged, clutching a substantial bundle of paperwork. Her eyes were calm. Her voice remained steady. "I suggest you all take a look at the property lines. Before you make a mistake you'll regret." And that's when everything started to unravel. Let's rewind. My name is Jack Coleman. I'm a 56-year-old retired firefighter, and I've lived on this 100-acre ranch in Texas for nearly 2 decades. Emily, my wife, works as a paralegal, and she's exceptionally intelligent and determined. After I retired early due to a spinal injury, we relocated here seeking peace, quiet, and ample space to raise horses and lead a dignified, kind life. I keep my affairs in order. I pay my taxes. I donate hay to local animal shelters during dry seasons, and I host kids from the local middle school every spring to learn about ranch life. My land is not for sale. So when a group of well-dressed newcomers moved into the newly built subdivision next to my property and formed their little HOA, I paid no attention. After all, they had their gated community. I had my land. That is, until the day I saw bulldozers on my property. At first, I believed it was a mistake. Maybe someone was clearing brush. Maybe county workers had strayed off course. But no, they were paving something. When I walked out there, shocked, confused, and limping from my old injury, 3 men in orange vests and 1 HOA board member named Karen looked at me like I was the trespasser. "May I help you?" Karen asked, in that smug tone that made my stomach turn. I pointed at the half-formed road slicing through my lower pasture. "Yeah, what the hell is that doing on my land?" She gave a small, tight smile. Oh, it's a new access road. We voted on it. It connects the east entrance of the subdivision to Route 17. It enhances the functionality of emergency vehicles and school buses. It's part of our development plan." I laughed. I thought it was a joke. But Karen was serious. "You should be happy," she added. "This increases the value of your property." I stared at her. "You didn't ask. You didn't notify. You didn't get a permit from me. This is my land." She shrugged. "Eminent domain laws, Jack. Look it up." She was mistaken. I did look it up. Emily looked it up even harder. She printed out maps, deeds, property surveys, GPS markers from the county land office. That road, it wasn't on any official plan. No easement. No formal approval from the county. No vote. Nothing. They illegally built a road on private land, and then told me I had to keep it open. So I did what any self-respecting landowner would do. I put up a reinforced gate with a camera and a padlock and closed that so-called road down. Then I posted signs, "Private property. No trespassing. Violators will face legal consequences." That same night, someone ran their car straight through the gate and into my fence, injuring one of my maras. They left a note on my mailbox the next morning. "Enjoy your little protest. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." And oh, I did. 2 days later, I received a lawsuit from the HOA, which claimed I was violating their right-of-way. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, running my fingers over old photographs of my dad, who passed this ranch down to me, and wondered how we got here. We always taught our kids the values of kindness, respect, and standing your ground. Good people always act honorably, even when no one is watching. But how do you respond when individuals deceive, cheat, and harass in public? I'll tell you what I did. I told Emily we weren't backing down. We hired a land surveyor. We contacted a real estate attorney from San Antonio, and I started documenting everything. Every car that passed through was logged with dates, times, photos, license plates, and videos. Additionally, I began researching the bylaws of the Homeowners Association. It was discovered that their authority terminates precisely at the boundary of their property. But things didn't slow down. Karen and her team intensified their efforts. They called emergency meetings, printed flyers saying I was a public danger. They even contacted the local newspaper with a hit piece titled, "Man Block School Route, Ranch Standoff." Emily wanted to respond publicly. I told her no. We keep our heads down and let the facts speak. But then came today. When they sent the cops, they thought I'd fold. Instead, they're about to learn something else. I didn't just ban them from my land. I was going to shut them down, because I had more than just proof of land ownership. It was a cease and desist order, filed in district court and signed by a judge that very morning. And just as the officer raised his hand to order the gate to be opened, someone else pulled up in a black SUV behind the patrol cars. Karen was not prepared for this unexpected arrival. Someone was poised to intensify her situation tenfold. The black SUV swiftly approached, its tires crunching over the gravel with a sound akin to thunder. It didn't have police markings, but the way the patrol officers straightened up the second they saw it told me everything I needed to know. Karen, standing behind the officers in her smug blouse and HOA lanyard, took one look and paled like she'd seen a ghost. The driver's door swung open. Out stepped my wife, Emily. But this time, she wasn't just holding a stack of papers. 2 U.S. Marshals flanked her, and behind them came Judge Daniels, an older African-American man with thick glasses, a booming voice, and zero tolerance for nonsense. The entire yard went silent. "Who's in charge here?" the judge asked, eyes moving sharply from the officers to Karen. "I am," one of the deputies answered. "No," Judge Daniels snapped. "You're not." "I am. And I have an emergency injunction order that says this land is private, this road is illegal, and the HOA is now in direct violation of state law." Karen began to speak, but the judge cut her off. "Anybody who touches this land again, including you and your board, will face immediate arrest for contempt of court. Do I make myself clear?" Karen looked like she might faint. The officers stepped back awkwardly. One muttered something about conflicting information, but Judge Daniels waved the documents in his face. "This is a signed land deed. This is a survey. This aerial footage from a county shows that the road didn't exist 3 months ago. Seems there may have been some misinformation, officer, and it would be appreciated if you could address this." Then the judge turned to me. "Mr. Coleman, do you have anything else to say?" I nodded, stepping forward slowly. "Yes, Your Honor. I have videos of HOA members crossing the gate, even after I posted legal warnings. And I've identified Karen and 2 others as having vandalized my property, including a hit and run that injured my livestock." Emily handed the USB drive to one of the marshals. Karen backed away slowly, trying to slip behind the group. "Stay where you are," one of the marshals barked. "You're not going anywhere." But let me take you back to how all this trouble really began. Because believe me, the recent events, they're just the tip of the iceberg. It all started 7 months ago, the day I saw real estate developers camped out by my west fence line. They were walking the property edge with blueprints and tablets, talking loudly and laughing. One of them waved when he saw me on horseback. "Nice spot you got here, old-timer," he called out. "We're just laying plans for the new HOA community. You'll love it. It enhances the value of your property." I didn't reply. I simply stared, feeling a wave of unease wash over me. Later that evening, Emily called the county records office, and that's when we learned the truth. Some firm out of Austin had purchased the 400 acres beside my land, split it into lots, fast-tracked a development called Ridgeway Estates. Within a span of 3 months, the houses began to rise like mushrooms after a downpour. They installed elegant gates, solar-powered lights, and curved driveways, joggers, dog walkers, board meetings. Suddenly, my peaceful rural life was surrounded, but I didn't complain. It's important to accept and coexist with others. I didn't go to the HOA meetings. I didn't file noise complaints. I didn't report their kids for throwing balls over my fence. I simply respected my property and maintained my tranquility. That was the case, until the day they decided my land belonged to them. Karen knocked on my door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey neighbor," she said, "we've got this plan to improve traffic flow and reduce emergency response time. The community voted on an access road." She tilted her head and added, almost sweetly, "Just a little shortcut." Karen's pale face twitched. Her carefully lacquered confidence was peeling off in real time, and I could almost hear the gears in her mind trying to spin a new lie into motion. But nothing could prepare her for what came next. Judge Daniels stepped forward. "Marshal, please serve her." One of the U.S. Marshals handed Karen an envelope. "You've been served with a civil restraining order, criminal trespass notice, and a formal complaint under Texas Penal Code 28.03 for criminal mischief," he said. "You may want to get an attorney." Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes flitted to the news van now pulling up to the scene, camera already rolling. Someone must have tipped them off. Perfect. Judge Daniels turned back to me. "Mr. Coleman, I believe your land will remain your own, as it should have always been. The legal process will now proceed with full weight." I nodded. Gratitude tightened my throat. "Thank you, Your Honor." But this wasn't over. No, not by a long shot. This wasn't just a battle for my pasture. It was a battle for the principle of ownership, for standing up to people who manipulate rules, twist truth, and weaponize bureaucracy. Karen was just one face in a system I now saw for what it really was. And it was time to dig deeper. Later that night, as the blue and red lights faded from my front gate and silence returned to my ranch, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table. We weren't celebrating. We were planning. The cease and desist had halted the immediate invasion, but there was something more, something darker, lurking underneath all of this. That road. It wasn't just a mistake or a rogue development. Someone in the county had looked the other way. Records had been updated without formal authorization. A property line had been redrawn digitally, but never on paper. Emily leaned across the table and whispered, "I think someone in the planning department's in on it." And that's when our story stopped being about one man versus an HOA and became something far bigger, because the next morning, an anonymous envelope showed up on our doorstep. Inside, a flash drive, a hand-drawn map of Ridgeway Estates with handwritten notes and arrows, and a post-it that read, "You're not the only one they've tried to steal land from. Look into Parcel 14B." I turned to Emily. "Looks like we're not done yet." The morning fog clung to the windows like a warning. The flash drive from the anonymous envelope sat in the center of our kitchen table, humming with silent weight. Emily clicked it into her laptop, and we both leaned in as the files loaded. There were 5 folders: parcel maps, internal emails, HOA board surveillance, county contracts, whistleblower note.txt. Emily clicked the last one first. A plain text document opened with only one paragraph. Parcel 14B was never meant to be sold. It was held in trust for agricultural preservation. Ridgeway bought it under a shell LLC and bribed Planning Commissioner Dale Whitmore, Karen's cousin. There's more than one road planned. They intend to use eminent domain as cover. You weren't there first. You won't be the last. A friend. I felt a chill crawl across my spine. Emily clicked into the internal emails folder next. Dozens of redacted exchanges between Ridgeway Development's legal team, HOA board members, and what appeared to be county planners scrolled by. But one email thread caught our eye. It had no redactions. Subject line: Phase 2 Access Corridor Urgent. The content made my blood run cold. Curtis has confirmed landowner is resisting. Proceed with alternate plan. Phase 2 corridor must be operational by Q4 or we lose the grant match. Whitmore says she can handle local press. Push back on permits if necessary. Safety route narrative is working. Keep up pressure. Curtis, the HOA board member who stood in my pasture like he owned the place. This wasn't negligence, Emily said. This was coordinated. We didn't need coffee. We were already wired on adrenaline and anger. Emily called Judge Daniels, and within an hour we were in his chambers, laying everything out. The judge, now technically recused from future litigation, referred us to a federal investigator specializing in real estate fraud and public corruption. But we didn't stop there. I called every neighbor along the ridge, particularly those whose land touched the new road. A rancher named Bev Miller was the first to respond. She was in her late 60s, tough as saddle leather, and her land had been in her family since 1949. Parcel 14B? She said over the phone. That used to be my uncle's hayfield. Ridgeway claimed it was abandoned, said they found a loophole, but we have the original deed. My cousin has it in a safe in Abilene. I felt like someone had lit a fuse in my chest. Bev, I said, how would you feel about holding a town meeting? That Friday, beneath the old fire hall on County Road 9, 46 people showed up, farmers, homeowners, retirees, and 2 former county employees. Emily laid out the documents on a projector, and I stood at the front of the room with my worn-out Stetson in hand. We've all been fighting this alone, I told them, but it turns out we weren't the only ones targeted. This isn't about one ranch. It's about a pattern of deceit. Our land, our rights, our lives, sold behind our backs. The room erupted in whispers. Then someone clapped. Then another. And then the whole room was on its feet. We weren't just victims anymore. We were building a case. A coalition. A resistance. What we didn't know yet, what none of us knew, was that Karen and the Ridgeway board had gotten desperate. And desperation, as I come to learn, is when people do stupid, dangerous things. Because late that night, as Emily and I returned home, we found our barn doors wide open. Inside, empty horse stalls, 3 broken saddles, and a trail of hoof prints leading out to the southern fence. They'd let our horses loose. The wind was sharp that night, sharp enough to sting as Emily and I rode our ATV along the southern fence line, our headlights sweeping across open pasture. I called out for each of our horses, voice cracking with worry. Dusty. Ladybird. Emily gripped my arm and pointed. There, near the mesquite grove, we found 2 of the horses, shaken but unharmed, lingering near the broken fence line. The 3rd, Ranger, our youngest stallion, was missing. We spent hours searching, hearts pounding every time we heard a rustle or saw a shadow. Finally, around 2 a.m., we spotted him tangled in wire near the edge of Ridgeway Estates. One of his legs was gashed, his breath labored. I remember the way Emily's voice cracked as she said, "He's hurt bad, Jack." We called the emergency vet. As we waited, I crouched beside Ranger, stroking his neck, rage burning behind my calm. This wasn't just harassment. This was cruelty. And I was done playing defense. The next morning, we filed a formal criminal complaint. With the flash drive, the anonymous note, the surveillance footage, and now property damage and animal endangerment, the sheriff had enough to involve state authorities. The investigation was officially opened. But Ridgeway didn't slow down. If anything, they doubled their efforts. The very next day, a flyer appeared in every mailbox in Ridgeway Estates. Jack Coleman, dangerous rancher or deranged vigilante. This man has assaulted our development, endangered our families, and blocked a vital road meant for school children and emergency responders. We urge all residents to sign the petition for county intervention. Emily read it out loud, jaw tightening. They're trying to make you look like a domestic terrorist. Let them, I said, printing new signs for my gate. Every lie they tell just makes the truth louder. But something still didn't sit right. Karen and Curtis were bold, but this level of escalation suggested they had someone bigger behind them. That's when Bev Miller called again. "You need to see this," she said. "Bring Emily." When we arrived at her ranch, Bev laid out a set of glossy brochures on her kitchen table. They showed mock-ups of luxury townhomes, a lifestyle retreat, and something called Ridgeway Wellness District, all drawn over aerial shots of our valley. "I got this from a real estate convention in Houston last month," she said. "Guess whose name is on the development license?" Emily leaned in. "Tell me it's not." Bev nodded grimly. "Dale Whitmore, Karen's cousin, head of the county zoning commission." Suddenly, it all clicked. The fast-track construction, the unrecorded roads, the fake HOA easements, the pressure on private landowners. This wasn't just a rogue HOA acting on delusions of power. This was organized land theft, legal fraud disguised as community development. And our little road war? It was just step one of a multimillion-dollar scheme. I sat back in Bev's kitchen chair, numb. They're trying to push us all out, one by one, until they own every inch of this land. Emily stared at the floor for a long moment, then looked up. "Then we take the fight to them." And that's exactly what we did. We launched the Landline Project, an initiative to protect rural landowners from illegal development schemes. Emily worked with legal networks, Bev gathered community stories, and I turned our ranch into a command center. Soon the story was out, not just in our county, but statewide. The local news did a segment titled "The Road War at Coleman Ranch." A podcast picked up the story, then a regional outlet, then national. Emails poured in from across the country. Landowners from Alabama to Arizona wrote to say they'd been victims of the same tactics. But just as the tide began to turn in our favor, Curtis made one last desperate move. He filed an emergency injunction claiming I had violated HOA sovereignty and had caused economic distress to Ridgeway Development. I laughed when I read it, until I saw what they'd attached. A forged document, supposedly showing I had granted utility easement 5 years ago, right where the road cut through. Only one problem. That land. It had been untouched for 6 years, and I'd been in a hospital during the date on the document. They had committed outright forgery, and they were going to regret it. Emily didn't speak for a long time after examining the forged easement document. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from sheer fury. "They used your old signature," she said, "from that water rights application in 2018. They scanned it and pasted it here." I looked down at the paper and felt a slow, boiling rage rise through my chest. That's a federal offense. Forgery. Fraud. And if they filed this with the county, wire fraud too, Emily added, her voice low. "Let's bury them." Within the hour, we were on a conference call with the State Attorney General's office. Emily had already flagged the discrepancies, annotated the document's metadata, and compiled an affidavit showing where I had been the week the forged agreement was supposedly signed, in a hospital bed in San Antonio, recovering from a ruptured disc. The AG's investigator, Agent Rosales, sounded intrigued. "Mr. Coleman, we've been monitoring complaints about Ridgeway Development. This might be the evidence we need to open a statewide investigation." I hung up the phone and felt the first real exhale I'd had in weeks. They tried to steal my land, my livestock, and now my signature. But now it's their turn. But Curtis and Karen weren't done. Not by a long shot. That weekend, a private security company began patrolling the so-called Ridgeway Road. Big guys in black uniforms with sunglasses, carrying tablets and jotting down license plates. They claimed they were monitoring access for community safety. One of them dared to step a boot over my fence line. I was there before his second step hit the ground. "Afternoon," I said. "You're trespassing." He didn't flinch. "I've been contracted to secure this area." "This area's mine," I replied, holding up a laminated survey. "And I suggest you walk back the way you came." He lingered for a beat too long, then turned, walked. But that wasn't the end of him either. That night, I checked the camera feed from our pasture gate, and I saw him again, walking the line in the dark, flashlight off, tablet glowing faintly, stopping every few feet, like he was measuring something. Emily was already dialing the sheriff. They're trying to map new boundary lines. In the dark, hoping we won't notice. That call triggered a chain of events I'll never forget. Sheriff Nolan, a grizzled man with a no-nonsense walk, showed up the next morning with a deputy and a representative from the Attorney General's office. They asked to see the forged document, and then asked us to walk them through every square foot of the disputed road. By the time we finished, Agent Rosales turned to Sheriff Nolan and said, "This isn't just a land grab. This is organized real estate fraud." That same day, subpoenas were issued to Curtis, to Karen, to Ridgeway's executive VP, and to Dale Whitmore. The next few days unfolded like a wildfire. Karen disappeared from Ridgeway. Her home was suddenly up for sale. Rumor had it she'd flown to Florida. Curtis was served in front of a live HOA board meeting. When the marshal handed him the envelope, the room went silent. He tried to laugh it off, but his face said otherwise. But the moment that sealed it all came exactly 1 week later. A press conference. Courthouse steps. The Attorney General's office announced the indictment of 5 Ridgeway officials and 2 county employees for conspiracy to commit land fraud, forgery, and illegal use of eminent domain arguments on privately held land. The cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved forward. And in the middle of it all, Emily and I stood quietly on the edge, hand in hand. We didn't cheer. We didn't shout. We'd fought too hard for too long. But that night, back at the ranch, we stood by the old gate, the one they tried to run down, the one that now stood taller, stronger, reinforced with steel and justice. I reached up and hung a new sign. Private property. Protected by Texas law. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Beneath it, Emily hung one of her own. And by Jack and Emily Coleman. Justice had been served. But more importantly, we'd taken our land back.